Okay, sounds good.
All right, Michael, how are you?
Really
Round
good.
round two.
All right, let's do this.
Um, I think I should mention that in our previous conversation, it was there was a time limit on Zoom, so we did about
Yeah.
it was my mistake. It wasn't an hour. It was actually 40 minutes. But
Okay.
so there's actually no time limit now because I
Oh,
subscribed. So
they got. Oh,
we'll
you
just
subscribe?
yeah,
Oh, they
yeah.
got rid of it. Okay, okay.
So we'll just see how far we go. I think
Mhm.
it'll be it'll only be appropriate if we picked up where we left off, if you don't mind.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
We were talking
Good.
about so 2 weeks ago we were talking about um the Indonesian, let me see here, the Indonesian identity through language.
Yep.
And you were talking about how before the Dutch came into Indonesia,
Hmm.
pretty much we were kind of sort of separate. What would you call it? Colonies with
Well,
completely
yeah, different kingdoms, basically.
yeah, different kingdoms, and then
Mhm.
it was only until the Dutch came in that we really started to develop this Indonesian identity through language. Um,
Yeah.
I didn't know
Well,
that.
it's more. I would say this. I would say it's that since the Dutch came in, right, and they basically conquered the islands, right? And they create Dutch East Indies. So that's where like Indonesia became like sort of a became a country where like I guess it's like India, right? That's one thing I can think of, the closest thing. Like it's like India, right? Like India is like a bunch of different kingdoms, like you got like I think I'm gonna offend the Indians too. It's like without the British, there wouldn't be a unified India, right? And without the
Ah,
Dutch, there
I
wouldn't be a unified
see.
Indonesia.
I
Yeah.
see. I know what you mean now. Yeah, I see. So there wasn't that so that identity. I wonder why that came up during the Dutch colonization instead of say the Japanese, because the Japanese was there much longer, right? I think
No, I
300.
thought the Japanese is there for 4 years, right? Like, they're not there for that long.
Oh, okay,
But
maybe
I
I
will.
mixed them. I mixed them up.
The Dutch is there for like 200, 300
Oh, I
years, and
yeah, I mixed
the
them up.
Japanese there for like World War II, right?
Right,
So.
right. I mixed them up. So yeah, yeah. So it makes sense why this identity started from the Dutch colonization.
Mhm,
So I think we talked about that because I was asking you why you started your Substack. Let me just
mhm.
give remind people here. Your Substack is Indonesian and American by Michael P. Marpaung, which is how me and Michael first discovered each other.
Yes.
So I asked you why you started this Substack, why you wanted to write about the Indonesian and American culture and how that affects your life, your
Hmm.
upbringing, how that shaped you. And then you started talking about the way the just like what we talked about the Indonesian identity was actually sourced by our language. That was the common thread um,
Do
that
you want me to like
united.
explain that, like elaborate that?
Yeah, yeah, sure, sure.
Yeah. So yeah. So basically, when Indonesia became independent, right? There's basically a lot of like, well, people don't get along, like a lot of like ethnic groups, and there's some people. I think some like groups still want to be with the Dutch, or some want to have their own country, and things like that. And like again, this is just a theory of mine, but I think the reason like we go with Indonesian language, which is again, like I said before in the previous video, is kind of like constructed language, but not really. It's from like the Malay language, is because it's one way to like keep a unified country, right?
Yeah.
Which is like why the Indonesian language is like that's what differentiates us from like say Malaysia, right? Which also has a variant of Malay. I think in English we call it Malay, just Malay, but like in they call it Bahasa Malaysia, which is basically the same thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyways, like without that language, I don't think Indonesia would have like I don't know, like a unified, like I don't think we'll be able to get along with each other. We'll be like, I don't know, India, I think, you know, like it's like the world's biggest democracy, but it's also doesn't work very well. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess
Mm,
India has
that
yeah, they don't have a singular language like Indonesia does, right?
Yeah, I think they have Hindi, but like there's also a lot of people who doesn't speak that, and I think English is like the language where everyone speaks. I mean, that's as far as I know. So, I don't want to speak with out of my, butt here. It's like, but basically that's my understanding.
Yeah, I think there's a I guess it goes back to this question of what it means to be Indonesian, and I guess it's sort of like asking what it means to be American. We're
Yeah.
not
hmm
really, we're kind of a mixed bag, I suppose.
Yeah.
If we look at me and you, for example,
hmm
I also have this complication of having Chinese ancestry.
hmm
So in a way, I'm a minority, if you can say that, a minority
Well,
Indonesian.
I mean,
And
what is it?
but you're also a minority because you come from the
Yeah.
Batak people, which is, and
Yeah.
and then a Javanese person will say, well, I'm also a minority because, and then so I guess there's no such thing as okay, this is Indonesia, and then the rest are minorities, right?
I mean, the closest thing I can think of, like a majority is Indonesia is religious, which is like a Muslim,
Yeah, there is a
I don't,
majority. Yeah,
yeah, but it's a whole can of worms. I think you understand it more than me since you're in Indonesia, like the politics. I only know like I have some cursory understanding, but I think you know more that about me, the whole religious politics in Indonesia.
I think you nailed it in the head. If there is one thing that is extremely unifying in Indonesia, it's not race. It's not really race. It's probably language and religion. Um,
Yeah.
Other than that, again, I come from a,
Mhm.
I do have some sort of Chinese background, whatever it is. I'm not really in touch with it.
Mhm.
You have a Batak background, and probably, the issue of what would you call it, race
Yeah,
or
race, I guess, or ethnicity.
ethnicity. It kind of dilutes itself as the world becomes more and more modern. I mean, I don't
Yeah. I
really,
think
yeah,
yeah, you can see this in like Jakarta, I think. Where like what's that? Well like you start speaking Indonesian, right? So your ethnic identity is basically like starts becoming less important to you. So
yeah,
again, this might be a tangent, but like from my understanding, like the whole ethnicity starts become less important, and I think religion is more important because like now instead of like like orang Batak, and another orang Batak, it's more like okay, like as long as you're like Christian, it's fine. Like my brother, I think he married like he didn't marry a Batak. He married a orang Sunda, I think. And the
yeah,
story is a little complicated. I'm not gonna get into that, but it's like, but I think she started as Muslim, but then so my parents object, but then she became a Christian, and the objection disappeared. So, and I think that's basically, again, I only have a cursory understanding. So I think that's basically happened. It's like in places like Jakarta where all the ethnic groups mixed up. It's like, okay, ethnicity starts becoming less important. It's still important, but it's less important. And then it's more about religion. And that's why like there's like religious politics is kind of big there,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah. I suppose your parents didn't bring up the fact that she was Sundanese and you guys were Batak. That wasn't really the core issue.
Yeah, that wasn't really the core issue because, like,
Religion
in
was
the
the core issue, and probably
yeah,
like I
mhm.
don't know, probably education
that
trumps race,
that's
right?
a yeah,
Trump
that's a factor too. It's like again,
Probably
it could be like
education is more important than race these days. I mean, race is sort of so diluted in today's modern world.
yeah, yeah, definitely. Hmm.
Yeah, we also talked about privately through DMs this idea of you remember I talked to you about are we selling out as young Indonesians if we
Yeah, yeah,
embrace the English language so much?
yeah. I know,
I
I know.
mean, look, I'm not gonna all of a sudden change this podcast to Bahasa Indonesia. I'm
Yeah,
gonna continue
yeah. I mean,
because I'm
it's like
comfortable with that, right? But the
yeah, I
questions
can.
still,
Yeah,
yeah, please,
exactly, exactly. Even when I speak Indonesian, it's like sometimes the words I use is like translated into like English. It's like
of course.
it's like okay, it's like an example. I remember talking to my like I think my uncle. It's like it's like what it's like in an English. It's like what's up, right? It's like a greeting, right? But I
What's
say
up?
it in
Like, what's up?
Indonesian, like yeah, like it's like "Ada or something like that, and it comes across as rude. So it's like, it's like yeah, it's like I'm just so American in my mind. Even when I try to speak Indonesian, it's like American phrases came out. That's you know, but that's how it is.
Yeah, I guess there's a formality. It's funny. I took Chinese like I don't know a
Mhm,
few weeks. Nothing serious. It was just for fun while I was in Australia. And there was
mhm,
a word for bye bye. I can't even remember what it is, right?
mhm.
Um, and then I talked to my Chinese friend, and then I used that word, and then they said, "Oh, you're definitely not Chinese because Chinese would just say bye bye," you know, or they would just say hey, and then speak their normal
Yeah,
Mandarin
yeah,
instead of
yeah. It's
saying
like
like Indonesian. Who the hell says sampai jumpa? You just
no,
say bye. Yeah, bye bye
yeah,
bye.
yeah,
If you
exactly.
say the actual formal um, language, it's
Yeah,
yeah. I guess English is has really permeated into today's um, nomenclature. So
definitely.
you don't think it's like a sellout thing?
I mean, it's like, you gotta use the tools you're handed. It's like I mean, I will say this, the language you speak will like, you know,
Shape you
change how you think. Like it's hard to describe, but it's
exactly.
like when you speak English, you basically also take into like English ideas, Anglo ideas, so your ideas of science, philosophy, things like that. The more you speak English, the more you kind of assume it. You might not think about it like explicitly, but like inside your mind, you're like, I don't want to be like, like psychological, but psychoanalyzing, but inside your mind, you kind of assume it, and sometimes you catch yourself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Have you ever heard this anecdote? I think I learned this in business school about Korean Airlines changing their language in the cockpit to English. Have you ever heard
Hmm.
of that
Uh,
anecdote?
I don't think so. Tell me about it.
So yeah, so it's fascinating, right? This Korean Airlines was at one point they had one of the highest crash rates,
Oh,
global crash rates in the world. And after further investigation, it was they found one of the issues was within the language because Korean's language was not was Korean language is so hierarchical uh,
Mm.
use a completely different word, completely different tone, and a completely different approach when you talk to an elderly. Not just an elderly, I mean literally someone 2 years older than you. You use,
Okay.
if I'm not mistaken, there is a completely different approach to do that. So this hierarchy created an inefficiency in communication. So let's say like you would never like the co-pilot would never challenge the main pilot, whatever you call it, because of the seniority uh complex, I guess, because of the hierarchical nature of the language. So it's fascinating how language actually shapes your behavior and shapes how you act within an elderly, someone older than you, for example, or someone younger. So because of that, I don't know if I'm pretty sure they still use English today. Inside the cockpit of Korean Airlines, the pilots have to use English, right? Because
Okay.
English is a very, what would you call it? More egalitarian. It's not really hierarchical.
More efficient. It's more efficient. It's straight
Yeah,
language. You can use
yeah,
it for like
exactly. It's straightforward.
it's very good if like if you want to like if you go in a market and you say you know how much is this thing cost? Oh, it's $5. English is very good with it because like but but yeah, yeah, go on.
yeah, and also I don't know what you call this. You know more about language than me. I think it's pronouns. So
Pronouns.
you
Oh yeah,
I.
yeah.
So if you is it pronouns? I don't know.
No, 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 no.
Identifying. So in
No, but
Indonesia,
like he or she or
yeah, yeah, yeah. So in Indonesia, um, you if you want to address an older person,
Mhm.
there's a different word. Maybe you use anda. If you're talking to a small child, you use kamu because
Yes.
it's a much more, I don't know, informal setting. But if you're talking to someone senior, someone with seniority, you will never say kamu or lu, or you will
Yeah,
say
no.
anda or bapak or ibu, something. You address it in
Yeah,
you address the person in a completely different manner based on their seniority, their
yeah,
position,
yeah.
and that's I think that's the same with Korean language. There's this
Is it like
hierarchical nature.
Japanese where they got like it's like where they got like honorifics? I think that's what it's called. Is it like that? I guess.
Yeah, yeah. What is that, pronouns? I don't know, but in
No, it's not
English,
pronouns. It's
yeah,
like
in English, you is you, or
yeah.
you is, yeah, you don't really address someone differently. Hello is
Mm,
hello. How are you is how are you. That word you, when you're addressing someone, it doesn't matter if you're talking to the president, you will still say, how are you doing?
mm,
Um, and if you're also addressing a 5 year old, you will also say, how are you doing? It's the same way you address an individual regardless of their seniority. But as you know, in Indonesian, apa kabar Pak, and apa kabar Anda, compared to apa
mm.
kabar kamu. I'm sorry for the non-Indonesian speakers, but it's just a complete, you know what I mean, right? It's a completely different way of
Yeah, yeah.
addressing someone. And it's amazing how language, that uh, how using Korean language inhibits
Mm.
communication in such a manner that it creates more crashes, more miscommunications, more. Um, so
Yeah,
yeah,
that's interesting. Yeah, I
yeah,
didn't know that.
language definitely shapes what how you interact and what you think
Yeah. And like
personally.
another
Also,
example I would bring is I think the Greek language, there's a reason why like philosophy comes out of Greece. I got this from I think from E. Michael Jones. Like he said like there's this word called like logos. Like if you
ah,
read the
what books?
Bible, it's like I think it was John, the first chapter of the book of John, the Gospel of John. It's like in the beginning there was the Word, which is in English. Like, what does that mean? Like the Word.
Mm.
But in I think but in Greek it's logos, which is like means the Word, but also means like the order of the universe. It's like such a big concept. Like
Yeah,
I
I think
think
I
in
heard Jordan
Indonesian,
Peterson talk about that.
yeah. In Indonesian, to be fair, I think it's sabda, which is a better concept, but we don't really use that in everyday language. So, it's like it has to be in Greek, it's like so basically that's also an example, like, like how you speak, like, why are the Greeks why are philosophers why did philosophy came out of Greece? I think their language played a part.
Also, I think language, it's not just about how you speak. It's not just auditory communication between human beings. It's also how you think, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Language isn't auditory. It's also like silent here. The way you interpret the world is through language. It's not just communicating, saying hi and but it also shapes the way you think. I think I don't know. That's what maybe what the Greeks were talking about when they say in the beginning there is the word. Because if there is no word, how would you even think? How would you
Yeah,
even start to do anything
yeah,
without language? I mean, that's why animals are where they are now. They do not have a sophisticated language, therefore they cannot interpret the world in a sophisticated way, therefore they cannot think, therefore they cannot communicate and make buildings
yeah.
and
I
destroy
mean,
each other eventually.
humans have language. I think that's what distinguish, like, what you call, yeah, humans from animals, basically. I know, like, a lot of people's like, well, whales have this. No, that's not language, the way I see it. Like, language is very complicated, and it's like, ah, well, it's like I don't think there's ever a time where we don't have a language. It just, you know, that we. I don't think so. It's like I don't think. Again, this is like kind of like what you call 'em, getting off topic. It's like if you think about like like what you call like the evolution or something. Like people's like, well, humans used to like just talk like monkeys and like I don't know. I don't think so. That. But again, like we're getting off topic. Just kidding.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we shouldn't start talking about evolution. We shouldn't start going
That's
there.
that's another can of worms.
Yeah. Actually, I wanted to mention something interesting about this whole, us being Indonesian and speaking the English language. There is this, do you know Mr. Gita Wirjawan? Probably.
No,
So
tell me about him.
he is the former Minister of Trade of Indonesia. He's a Harvard graduate. I think he did his bachelor's in Texas. Anyway, very educated person and former Minister of Trade. We call it Minister of Trade in Indonesia. In the U.S., I think they call it Secretary of Trade. Secretary of, instead of Minister, they say Secretary.
Okay.
And Mr. Gita Wirjawan has actually, you know how some like presidents are very nationalistic and they don't want to, for example, you will never ever see Xi Jinping speak English, even if I don't think he even can, but even if he can, he won't ever do it, right?
Yeah, that makes
Or
sense.
or Putin, he can speak English, but he will never do it in a public setting, right? They have this deep patriotism about them. But Mr. Gita Wirjawan actually he promotes Indonesians speaking a foreign language because it allows them to participate in globalization, participate in the bigger world. it doesn't even have to be in English. It can be in Mandarin or German or what's another big Japanese, for example.
Spanish.
Yeah, Spanish. So in it's not selling out to him. It's not selling out at all. It's actually it's a benefit to you to be able to because it's like a rule of the it's like a if you want to play in the global world today, one of the rules is you have to be able to, you know, have strong command of either English or Mandarin or Hindi or any of these big languages. Otherwise, you're just going to stay stuck in your own little culture and not being able to participate. And he said something interesting in one of the speeches. He said, I'm going to use Indonesian here and I'm going to translate it. Um, Jika kita mau menginternasionalisasikan nasionalisme kita harus bisa berbahasa Inggris atau Jepang atau Jerman. So what that means is, if you want to internationalize your nationalism, which is I think an interesting idea, if you want to internationalize your nationalism, you have to be able to speak. You have to be able to have a strong command of either English or German or Japanese and so on and so forth, right? So if you are a nationalist, if you are proud of your country and you want to spread the word, let's say, you're going to be so much more effective if you can spread the word in English like we're doing right now.
Yeah, that's true.
Imagine if we're speaking Indonesian. Um, not
Yeah,
that
everyone knows.
not that many people are listening right now, but if in the future people are listening to this and we're speaking Indonesian, like 99% of the market is just gone and they will never hear this conversation, right?
There's like, yes, an example is like, like Alexander Solzhenitsyn. He has very famous, works, right? But there's this work of his, it's called like, I think 200 Years Together, which is in Russian, right? Like, because he's Russian, right? But like, basically a group of people basically didn't like this work of his. So basically they're doing all they can to make sure that it's never translated to English. So
Right.
yeah, so there's a lot of like that's one way like if like people they don't want your stuff to get out, it's like, oh, that's not translated to English, so that's not translated to our language or whatever. So
Yeah,
yeah,
so
so
cut you off from the global language and
yeah,
vice
exactly.
versa, as Mr. Gita Wiryawan says, if you don't want to be cut off, if
Hmm.
you want to participate in the global world, yeah, it's nice to be to be proud of your language, but are you just gonna just use it and then not be able to participate in a larger sense?
I mean, there definitely needs a balance, I would say. Like, mm, it's like the difference, like, there's like particularism and like universalism, right? Like the temptation is like, I think a lot of like the nationalist touch, like, they don't want, they don't like globalization. And I kind of understand because, all the countries basically became the same thanks to globalization. And I don't want that, right? I want
Yeah,
every country to be different. They have their own unique. There's a reason those countries exist, and I want them to bring into the table like what makes them unique, instead of like them becoming like, a third rate America or third rate like England or something, right? But on the other hand, you can't just like, like cocoon up in your own world and like pretend that like you can just you won't be affected by the outside world, like North Korea. Like,
yeah, exactly.
I think both there's like it's like two extremes that are wrong. It's like, okay, so you need to be like, okay, I like my country and I want like Indonesia, for example, to become Indonesia, but we also can't just close ourselves and pretend that like the outside world doesn't matter, because the outside world does matter.
Yeah, and if you look at China, they have such a strong nationalistic agenda. But if you look at the educate, if you look at the young population of China, like when I was in Australia, probably 90% of the students in business school was Chinese, and they speak good English. They participate in Western education, and I'm sure you went to Rutgers and University of Maryland, right? I'm sure there's no shortage of Chinese students there. And but
Definitely like yeah, Asians and like Rutgers, I think. Yeah, definitely.
yeah, but what do? They learn in English, but then they transfer that knowledge back to China. So
Yeah, exactly. I
yeah, I
mean,
don't know.
China
I don't want
has
to praise China
issues.
too much here.
Yeah, China's have issues, but like gotta give credit where credit is due. I would say.
Yeah, I think I want to segue here to something very interesting for the both of us. I really want your opinion on this. You know, there's this, I don't know if you've heard of it, there's this thing called Chat GPT. Have you heard of it?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
I I
everyone.
I played around with it.
What's that?
Oh,
Yeah, yeah.
oh, you. I
I think,
think we cut up.
yeah.
All right, all right,
So,
okay. Let's. Where were you? Oh, I think you're talking about ChatGPT.
yeah. Well, what's your feelings on ChatGPT as a writer? I presume
Well,
you've used it before.
yeah, I've
You've
used
played
it. To
around.
be honest, it's I have a it's kind of complicated, so let me like get on my thoughts with it.
Yeah,
I mean, instinctively, I don't like it. Like obviously, like as a writer, it's like what is this thing? What is this like sorcery? It's like and but then I kind of think about it more, and it's like the idea that it can replace actual writers. I'm very skeptical of it. It's like because I try like playing around with it. It's like it's like write a story about this and that, and it's like you kind of at some point you kind of get the pattern of like what they're trying to run, and you know it, and I know it might feel a little cliche, but it's like there isn't they don't have the writing doesn't have any creativity. Just it just takes what's already in the database and try to like you know try to they put in like what you call they just put it together. It's like haphazardly.
that's exactly what it
And it's
is, though. It's a paper mache of billions of trillions of data points that is
yeah,
simply, yeah,
I used like speaking of AI, I also use like what you call it mid journey, like it just like kind of they make like AI art,
yeah. I've seen
and
some of
it's
your.
like yeah, it's like okay, it's kind of fun, but it's like if you want something really specific, you kind of it's like sometimes it's like pulling teeth. It's like no, this is not the picture what I'm looking for. You just keeps like like you keep like regenerate and like um again there's a pattern to what kind of image they want, like once you understand the keywords and things like that, all right, you kind of know that it's yeah, it is like yeah, paper mache of stuff, you put in the keywords and they generate it how they feel. I mean, I'm not saying that it's not a big deal because in a sense it is kind of a game changer because like you know hey, I don't have to go to an artist to generate like the cover picture for my book. And I can understand if artists may feel shortchanged out of that. On the other hand, I really don't have that the kind of money like to like just hire artists willy nilly. So it's not like I'm gonna pay an artist anyway. Like again, it's a very complicated thing to do, I kind of understand why people hate it, but I also understand why people use it. It's,
Have you?
it's,
Maybe you've heard about the Hollywood writers' strike.
yeah.
Have you heard about that? Of
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, like, I don't know, like, to be honest, it's like I haven't really paid attention to like Hollywood stuff anyway. So like, and a lot of Hollywood stuff is just really bad and really offensive. So the idea that they're not gonna make, like, to be honest, the idea that they're not gonna make any Hollywood stuff anymore is good.
well, yeah. Okay, but that's your personal value judgment, right? Uh, my point is, there is there's it seems this thing, this large language model, this technology. Okay, there's not enough. There's not. You're saying it doesn't have a voice yet. It's not creative and all that stuff, but the effects are not trivial either. I mean, these things are able to write long-winded scripts to the point where unions in a particular industry, not a small industry, by the way, a huge global industry, is to the point where they feel threatened. AI is only one of the issues. There are other pay streaming issues, things like that, but this is one of the things that they are afraid of. So I think and also one of the things that we know about technology is it's only going to get better, right? Um,
In a
aren't you?
sense, I guess. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
again, there's a reason why I say like Hollywood is bad, and I'm not just like making fun of Hollywood, as fun as that might be. It's like, why are they threatened? Because they've been like putting out terrible stuff. Like, I don't want to sound like a libertarian, but it's like they're putting out terrible stuff
What
so
do you?
bad that
So
even an
what's?
AI can do a
Yeah.
better job than them. Like that's why they feel threatened. It's like, yeah, I hope I don't come across as like flippant here, but it's like that's basically what it is, to be honest.
What's good to you? Have you ever experienced anything good from Hollywood? Like,
Like
let's
the
say,
old one,
yeah, exactly, 90s, 80s. Like,
50s, yeah, like the old movies like Ben-Hur, I would say the old one. I haven't seen the new one, but like the
Ben
old
what?
one, for example,
Ben what?
Ben-Hur, Ben-Hur, Hur.
Oh, I haven't. Is that
Yeah.
a Western movie?
No, it's like no, it's not Western. It's more like it's like a biblical movie, kind of. It's like it's based on a novel, which is also a pretty good novel, but I'm not gonna get into that. So it's like about this guy who like has an experience with Jesus, basically, and like again, it's complicated, but the point is that Hollywood used to make good movies. They used to make movies that connect with people. But
Yeah,
now they're just
absolutely.
more interested in like making like schlock, and they're more interested in like 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 being political. I guess one way to put it, like being like woke or whatever, making political statements, and people realize like, hey, I don't want this, And again, that if they're like, well, if they're threatened by AI doing a better job than them, like that's because they're bad writers, and
What
like
do
I
you
don't
think
know.
about? Let me throw out. Have you seen Shawshank Redemption, the movie?
No, I've heard of it, but I've never seen it.
What about Scarface?
I've seen Scarface. Yeah,
Yeah, Scarface, Godfather. What do you think about
I
those movies? Do you think they have some quality?
haven't seen Scarface, but I like Godfather. Not God. No, I mean, excuse me. I haven't seen Godfather, but I do like
Yeah.
Scarface. I think it tells a lot of, it speaks to like, the human, speaks to like, the situation at the time, I would say. I mean, I'm not saying there aren't good Hollywood movies. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that, you know, Hollywood movies nowadays, you know, I don't think they're interested in telling a good story. I think they're more interested in like, like, pushing their agenda. Number one, they're more interested in pushing their agenda. And like, I don't think, you know, I don't, either the writers don't have a talent to make a good movie that connects with people, or there's something within Hollywood that's like, what you call, that forces them to write bad things, like, and that's why I think that's why like they feel threatened by. I mean, that's why they feel threatened by AI because like because the output is when your output is to the when you stop being creative with your output, well, yeah, AI can do a better job. It can do your job for you. It's like fast food, I guess.
Right. That's a good analogy.
Hmm.
So but you are, I guess, um, admitting, not admitting, but you are acknowledging that yes, AI can replace writers in Hollywood, and there is a level of sophistication there, and you are admitting that, right?
I mean, I guess in a sense, yeah. I mean, there is a level of sophistication because they already working up there, like. But I guess when I'm against AI, it's like is not against it, but I guess I'm against the idea that AI can really replace, it's like completely, right?
Hmm.
Because again, there isn't any creativity to the AI, you just put in words and you just like, the image generates and okay, it's there. It doesn't really mean anything unless like there's a human mind that's like put it there. If that makes sense.
Yeah. What if there's a blind experiment? Let's stick to writing now, where
Mhm.
you didn't know um, whether or not it's created by AI or an actual human being. If you
Mhm.
don't know, well, it's hard to ask you this question because you actually have to run the experiment to find out how you actually feel about it. But if you let's say you can't tell the difference, oh, this is a good piece of writing. Oh, this is equally good. They're not both not fantastic, but yeah, they're good. And you can't tell the difference. So how would you feel then?
I mean, it depends, because like we're speaking in like abstract, so like we have to like give like actual writing samples, I guess,
Yeah, 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 yeah. You should probably run that experiment. Yeah, it's yeah, that requires some effort maybe.
Yeah,
Um,
because I think there's one time I used Chat GPT and it's like I mean like again to write a story. Well, one time tried to write stories like, and again it's just like I did for fun, but it's like at some point I kind of realized, it's like they're just like mashing things together based on the prompt. It's like I think I think like they're really good for like things where like it's where there isn't any sort of creativity, right? Like I remember using it to like, write a cover letter, or rewrite my resume. It's like,
yeah, yeah,
if you apply for a job, you need a cover letter. I hate writing cover letters, right?
yeah. They're
It's
good
it's
for
so
those
dumb,
those
right?
formal
Yeah.
things, I guess. Yeah, yeah.
They want you to sound like a robot in this cover letter. So
Exactly,
you know what?
exactly. Yeah.
I'm gonna have a robot write it for me. Like
Yeah,
that's basically that's what, if you write like a robot, you know, yeah, Chat GPT is gonna be able to like copy, you know. That's basically what I'm gonna say.
yeah. They really. I've actually experimented with them. Um, I remember I was writing one of my articles.
Mhm.
I think it was the one on. You commented on it. I think it was the one on celebrity wait at celebrity salary, celebrity payments,
Oh
something
yeah,
like
yeah.
that.
I
Yeah,
remember that.
yeah, you read that one. And I was almost going to write the conclusion. And sometimes when I write conclusions, I try to be funny, whether or not I'm funny or not, I don't know, as I try to put in a pun or like a silly, like a, a side remark. It's just one of
Mm-hmm.
my quirky personalities.
Gotcha.
And so before writing the conclusion, I thought, oh wait, let me ask ChatGPT to write a conclusion, and let's see if. And then the conclusion was so long-winded, and it just basically repeated every paragraph. Like it used my what I said and just said regurgitated it in a very articulate manner. Of course, it's articulate. It's well
Yes,
said.
it was this robot.
They chose better words than me. There's no typos. The words are more sophisticated. But the conclusion was like as long-winded as the whole essay, and I thought, wait, you're just repeating the whole thing. Usually, I just write like a few sentences of a conclusion with. I think at the end, my actual conclusion, I wrote something like, oh yeah, better to give money to Lionel Messi than any politician. Something like a funny, silly remark, right? That's how I like.
Yep.
Sometimes I end, but you know, that's what you were saying about personality when you write, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not just about writing a whole. I think the conclusion was like 5 paragraphs. And it just resaid what all the things that I said
Yep.
instead of the one paragraph saying with this unfunny joke that I said that shows my writing style and personality. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's definitely true that it's it's not surprising that it's robotic, but I wonder in the future whether it's gonna have wait, it's probably not gonna have a personality. Would it?
I
It's not.
I mean,
I mean,
they
because the
might have
question
like
is whose personality, right?
I mean they might have like sort of like no, I don't know, like a preset personality. It's like, okay, I'm gonna have this like write this essay, but put in like jokes that I don't know Joss Whedon would make or something like that. Something like that could happen, but it's like if you want to make something that's like okay, something with actual creativity, it's like something like a human being would write. You know, I don't think Chat GPT or anything could do that. Like again, I know it sounds vague. It's like it's not something that's quantifiable, in my opinion. I think like it's like it's something that you'll know it when you see it. That's how how I feel when like read the when I get like the prompt to like write a story with Chat GPT. It's like yeah, I know a robot writes this because if a human being gets a prompt to write this, it would have been completely different. If you know what I mean, like if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's more of a feeling, more of a feeling.
Yeah, it's more intuition basically. It's not something you can measure. To be honest.
One thing that I'll say is the conclusion that ChatGPT gave me was I would never, you can't pay me any amount of money to publish that because it's so long-winded, robotic. It's just the worst. Yeah, but I just ended up writing like a 4 sentence conclusion yeah, it was just a very it just really regurgitated uh, everything that I said.
Hmm.
Have you ever used it in any way for idea generation? Or I'll tell you what I use it for. I hope I hope the writing community doesn't crucify me for this. I don't think this is a sin. I use it for title generation. What's a good
Oh,
title for this? Is that bad? Am I committing a sin?
I don't think so. Not that I know of. I mean, to me, coming up with a title is kind of natural to me. So, but I know
Really?
I know people struggle with titles. So, I understand. I understand.
So I actually just copy paste my I use it for spell check. No, no, not
Oh,
spell check, like a grammar check or but and then I'll state like give me five good titles for this. 50% of the time I choose one of them. 50% of the time I don't. I just think,
mm.
no, it's not a good title. It's not yeah, this sounds like a title for a thesis or something. It's it's very robotic. But 50% of the time, sometimes um I choose it. So that's what I use it for. Do you use it for
Yeah.
anything at all?
Maybe use it out. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I haven't really used it. It's like, I mean, again, I used it for like I played around with it a little bit, but it's like the novelty kind of wore off after that. So like again, I mean, I use like image generators, but that's like I do it for my work, for my stories and stuff. But like with with like Chat GPT and things like that, I had fun for a little bit, but it's like I guess I just don't see the need for it. It's like maybe if you want to get rid of like like grammatical
Grammatical,
mistakes,
yeah.
yeah, or typos, which I think Grammarly already does that anyways. So if you have grammar, whatever, that they can do things like that. So
Yeah. Yeah, I can tell you're not a big fan of it.
no, not really. It's like I mean, at least I know at least with like image generators, you kind of like at least I see the use of it, because drawing isn't easy. It's a lot of work.
Yeah,
But like
yeah.
writing, you got a keyboard, you type. Like, why do you need a robot to do it for you? It's like,
Okay.
the-
Yeah. Probably the last thing we've gone over well over an hour now. The last thing I wanted to probably talk to you about is writer's block.
Mhm.
Have you ever had this feeling? You probably have this
Yeah, definitely.
horrific feeling where you open up the your laptop and you're looking at this blank screen and you just don't know what the hell. You're just thinking to yourself, what the hell am I gonna write about?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I would say this. I think the writer's block, in my opinion, you should tackle with like with brute force. Like I just brute force it. It's like, and I just okay, just write something, and maybe
Yeah.
you can get something out of it. It's like I'm not saying that writer's block don't exist. I know some people on Twitter make that like statement, which I found to be convincing, to be honest. But like, I do think they exist. But I think the best thing you deal with it is to like, well, assuming you haven't tried to like step away for a bit, you try to like just write something, just something, and maybe you can build up from like just brute force it and see what happens.
You know Tim Ferriss, by the way, the
uh,
podcaster.
uh, I don't know about him. What did he say though?
Oh, he's also a best-selling author. He wrote the book, The 4 Hour Work Week. If you for it's nonfiction, so you probably haven't heard of him. Um, he said writing books are probably one of the most brutal things he's ever done, and he's worth like hundreds of millions, right? So yeah, and it's a big achievement for him. And his mantra, whenever he has writer's block, he always says, "Okay, forget about writing a book. I'm gonna do 2 shitty pages. That's all I'm gonna do. It's gonna be
Mhm.
2 pages, and it's gonna be really bad." And that's sort of um, sometimes writer's block is about self-doubt.
Yeah, yeah,
Like
definitely.
you write something and who the hell's gonna read it? Or what the hell am I saying? So Tim Ferriss just said write 2 pages or even 1 page and make sure it's really shitty, it's bad. And that sort of goes once you realize, oh, it's going to be 1 page, it's going to be bad anyway. Your brain starts to think, okay, I'm just going to write it. And once you start writing, that's like you said, once you actually start, momentum is a crazy thing. Once you actually start, it's
Yeah,
actually
yeah,
not that bad. And you're probably right when you said that writer's block doesn't exist. It's like a, it's probably, well, it does exist, but it's in your mind, you know.
yeah. You know,
Um, so how often do you actually experience that?
I mean, I would say occasionally it happens. You know, it's like because sometimes you kind of, you know, like, you finish a story, right? You finish what you're trying to write, and then you're like, okay, you gotta do a new one. To me, like the hardest part about writing is getting off the ground. Like that's the hardest part. Because once you get off the ground, all right, you know what you're gonna, you kind of know where you're going. You might even like kind of discover something new about the story that you haven't seen before.
I'm sure that happens a lot. Happens to me a lot. Even writing like a 2,000 word,
Mhm.
relatively short, but the end product is usually really different from what I
Yeah, yeah.
discovered oh yeah, I never thought about that. And it goes a completely different direction. And yeah, what were you gonna say?
Yeah.
You just have to
So
start.
again, you get off again. Getting off the ground. That's the hardest part because like again, there's a blank screen, right? And you're like, oh, what am I gonna write there? But like once you get like just even a little bit, a little bit like words in there, then you know what you're doing, and and I'm not even talking about like outlining, because like when you have an outline with you, even getting off the ground is still hard, to be honest.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Like that first sentence, right?
Yeah,
Like a
but yeah,
sentence by
once
sentence is like, yeah, like what's the next word here? What's the intro for the next sentence here?
yeah,
It's a
yeah, because even
grind. It's like,
hmm yeah, but once you get like the paragraph, and you get the sentences, and you get like even a page, like okay, I know where I'm going with this, and if we have an outline, you're like, okay, I know how to connect these scenes, these passages, or whatever. So yeah, that's why like that's how you deal with writer's block. You brute force it, man. Like it's like the worst thing you can do is like step away. Like
mm.
because when you're stepping away, you're getting comfortable with like not working on it, and then like maybe you not work on it in like a week, and that week becomes a month, and that becomes a few months, it becomes a year. And I know about this because it happened with my first attempt at a novel, which is like 6 7 years ago. It's like I was able to get like 80,000, 90,000 words, about that much. And then I just, okay, I don't know where I'm going, which is, it's like my mistake was that I don't have an outline too. I don't have an ending in mind in some scenes, which is,
Oh wow.
yeah, but like, you know, I don't know where I'm going. And I'm like, okay, let me just step away from that. And then it just becomes like, you know, again, it becomes like 2 months, 3 months. And then I think by the time I have a job, I have a job, and then like I went to like grad school. It's like, it's like once you step away, it's really
Yeah.
hard to get back into it. It really is. So,
Yeah.
you gotta strike while the iron is hot, as the saying goes.
Yeah. It's like anything, like a diet
Mhm.
or
Yeah,
yeah, anything in life. Uh,
definitely.
I guess like Tim Ferriss says, 2 shitty pages is better than nothing. And
Hmm.
the mantra for any of you having writer's block is 2 words: just start. I think that's it. Just start. And see what happens. And don't take it from me, take it from Michael, who has written a 136,000 word novel.
Yep.
That's his advice.
There you go.
So
Yeah. Yeah. There you go.
yeah, yeah. Can I ask you how's it
Yeah.
how it's selling, or you're not comfortable?
Um, I mean, some people is buying it, but it's like, when you're like, an independent writer, and I'm not really good at marketing, to be honest. It's like it's like my very first book. I don't even, have a marketing budget. My budget is like zero, to be honest. Maybe a little bit more, but it's like I'm just like happy. It's my first book.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, who knows, man? Who knows? Uh, maybe Joe Rogan will see this podcast and will who knows, right?
That would
Look,
be
as
the dream.
always, great conversation, and probably will. We talked about writing and English language and identity.
Mhm.
Let's see where the um,
Mhm.
next conversation leads us.
All right, sounds good.
All right, I'll talk to you next time, Michael.
See ya.
Yeah.